Um, for this month, we have invited Seth Spencer to be our guest speaker. Seth is with the Teach Climate Network as a coordinator at Climate Generation, the host of the Summer Institute. The Summer Institute for Climate Change Education connects about 350 educators and professionals from around North America to share knowledge, resources, and best practices on teaching climate change to students. Now in its 20th year, the Summer Institute is co-planned and developed by 15 federal, state, and NGO organizations. Seth joined Climate Generation in 2020, helping the education program to create powerful professional development opportunities for educators across the country. Seth is a member of the Midwest Climate Collaborative's Community of Practice Leadership Team and coordinator of the Teach Climate Network Cohort Coalition. With that, Seth, welcome, and I'm turning it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dwayne. I'm going to just get my screen set up and then we'll kick things off. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Dwayne said, my name is Seth Spencer, and I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Teach Climate Network coordinator for a nonprofit based in Minnesota called Climate Generation. And so today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about some work that we have done around climate change education, professional development for formal and informal educators. And really kind of sharing how we got to this point of our 20th year of providing a virtual institute, really in partnership. And so when I kind of read about some of the work that this working group does, I thought this might be an opportunity for possible collaboration with some of the organizations or specific sections of extension that you all work in. I live just outside of the metro area of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, born and raised in Minnesota, but actually was a 4-H youth development educator in University of Wisconsin Extension about 7 years ago. And after that, moved up to Alaska and then moved back to Minnesota a few years ago. And I moved back and I joined Climate Generation, which, as I said, is a climate change education nonprofit that was started by this gentleman that you can see. This is Will Steger. He's a former science educator, but known probably much more so as a polar explorer, doing some of the first human-powered expeditions of the Arctic and Antarctic regions. Mostly in the kind of 1980s and 1990s, and coming back to the Midwest after some of these expeditions, really wanted to think about how do I share this firsthand experience of a changing climate with people that I know and members of my community, and really knew that educators were those change makers in the communities, and so using the power of personal stories to really empower teachers and students to really be aware of what's happening around climate change. So I'll give my little spiel about our mission, which is to ignite and sustain the ability of educators, youth, and communities to act on the systems that perpetuate the climate crisis. And we hope to do this in 3 different ways. One is to kind of overcome science disinformation, make sure that all of our programming and things that we share are really centered in systemic equity, and something that we're really kind of leaning into over the last few years, which is really trying to personalize and localize climate change action. I know that in Alaska, it was pretty easy to feel connected to understanding how climate change was impacting people and the natural world, but moving back to Minnesota, it took me a little while to kind of see some of those connections. And so that's definitely something that we really strive to do, to help folks see that every part of our world is impacted by climate change in different ways, of course, but really trying to see how do we prepare those communities around changes in agriculture, changes in city planning, changes in education. And we are now in our 20th year as an organization. And one of the main ways that we interact with educators is the Teach Climate Network. And we have about 8,000 teachers around North America that interact in programming that we provide in some different way. And so you can see here, North Dakota is our lone standout. We don't have any active educators in North Dakota, but pretty much the rest of North America, we have folks that are interacting with things like monthly professional development workshops for teachers, monthly newsletters that we send out to folks just to give them kind of best practices around climate change education. And then all of that culminates in which will be now our 20th annual Summer Institute for Climate Change Education. And the Summer Institute for probably about the first 14 years was an in-person 3-day institute or seminar to learn about climate change education. Most of those years it was held in Minnesota and was mostly for Minnesota and Midwest teachers. The COVID-19 pandemic really pushed us to, if we were going to host anything, we needed to go virtual. And in going virtual, we needed to partner with folks. And so this will be the 5th year that we are again virtual. We really found that for what we were trying to achieve, keeping it virtual, keeping it accessible for teachers not having to travel in the middle of July. That is one thing I'll talk about, is kind of that scheduling. Was really important. And we've continued in that what we call our cohort collaborative partnership, which is really working with other organizations to help us plan and really put on the Institute. And I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But the Summer Institute really is focused around building connection of teachers to make sure they feel connected and not alone in trying to talk about climate change, because that can be a challenge in certain regions. Making sure that we're at least talking about climate justice and how climate change impacts different communities in very different ways, and how many communities of color, but also or including many rural communities, are kind of being left behind in a lot of change that happens in capitals that can be hundreds of miles away. Trying to actually understand what climate change is, the science behind it, but also some of that data piece of how do we observe that it's happening around us. What are some of those climate action projects that we can actually help students engage in? And then also helping educators see that they can kind of empower themselves and their communities and their students to even make small steps around, whether it be environmental sustainability, trying to get solar for schools, things like that. So this is from last year's schedule, but the Summer Institute is held generally 3 days in the middle of July, which can be challenging to actually get folks to show up, but we found that trying to really meet educators where they're at, not trying to cram anything into June when many schools are still going on, and the same in August. But our current model is that during those 3 days, 2 days are what we call collective days, which is upwards of 350 teachers come together in synchronous virtual workshops, learning and getting to choose from different sessions, different panels. And those are days 1 and 2. And then our 3rd day, we have our partners that I'll talk about more in just a second, get to choose which day they're going to hold a really localized or regionally focused cohort day. And so really taking all this amazing information people have learned in the first 2 days and really trying to put it in a local context, because that's definitely something that I've found personally can be challenging, of like, okay, I hear about extreme weather that's happening in the southeast of the United States, or I hear about droughts and things like that happening in Africa and Asia. But really, what does climate change look like and mean to somebody living in the Midwest, that I'm not worried about polar bears disappearing? I'm not worried as much about sea level rise. And we really found that that was a great way to meet teachers, because they're also struggling with, how do I take this really huge concept of climate change and really make it relevant to students, make it not need to be political, because it is impacting our economy. It's impacting the way that we recreate in the winter. It's impacting how many days I can spend outside in the summer due to fires thousands of miles away in Canada. Um, and so we're continuing that model. And one of the reasons that I wanted to chat with you all today is that we are always looking for new partners to help us kind of fill in those missing places. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the goals, and then I'll talk about our partnerships. But you'll see here just some of the goals that we have for the Summer Institute and how we want to reach educators. A big part is just helping educators become more confident and be able to talk about climate change. You may run across data every once in a while that about 75% of teachers think climate change should be taught in schools, but about less than 50% currently are. And some of that might be just not support from school districts or state standards. A lot of it is just not feeling knowledgeable and comfortable to actually support student learning. We know that many states are updating their curriculum and their science standards to include climate change. And we hope that the Summer Institute helps folks kind of reach that confidence and knowledge level. Another is to just be aware of quality resources. We know the internet is amazing. There's so much great information out there, but it is also very overwhelming. And there's also a lot of information that is maybe not scientifically accurate, is not really keeping up with what we know about climate change and some of the solutions. So again, helping educators find those high quality resources. And then the really big one is kind of building that sense of community within regions. So, hey, maybe I don't feel super confident or knowledgeable or supported to bring climate change into connecting with my students. But there's another educator within my same state that is already doing it. And so again, building that confidence. We do have, I wouldn't say it's a unique approach, but historically, back when I was in high school and college, climate change was really only taught in the science classroom. And so that's really been a push probably of many organizations of making sure that climate change is at least being discussed or can be taught interdisciplinary. And so that's definitely something we focus on, making sure that, again, we have that justice focus, that science focus, but also that behavior. What can students actually do about it? Because while it may be great to give folks information and overwhelm them with information, but again, lots of research around climate anxiety or environmental anxiety of, okay, you just told me the world's ending and there's nothing I can do about it. So making sure that we are connecting educators with what are those possible small or even really large steps that students and classrooms and schools and communities can take to feel empowered. Okay, that's all great. Well, how do we do this? You may have seen this map before, but this is currently the National Climate Assessment regions, and really putting regions that have similar climate change impacts and solutions together. And so we've got our climate assessment region map here, and then we've got these little dots, because this is our dream of where partners coming together to help plan and implement the Summer Institute would really live. You can see we're based in Minnesota, but we would love to have other Midwest partners. We'd love to make sure that we're having strong support in the Southeast and the Southwest, and not forgetting about Alaska and Hawaii. And that's our dream. But I'll quickly go to kind of where we are. This was last year, and so right now we're kind of in the replanning phase, and so reconnecting with those folks to see who has capacity and interest and availability. But last year we had about 15, as Dwayne said, federal, state, and nonprofit organizations coming together to, over the course of January through June, really talk about what is the need currently for educators. What are they asking for support of? What are they saying that they don't understand about how to teach climate change? And actually help us put on that regional cohort day in July. And so we've got we've got really strong support in the Midwest. And then you can see the Northeast, California, Washington, Florida, Puerto Rico. But you can see there's a lot of regions, a lot of states that don't have that specific local support. And I'm gonna guess, Art, if you're talking about, is this University of Alaska Fairbanks that you're talking about? I want to make sure I know which UAF this is, and I'll just see. We don't have anybody currently in Florida or many of these other regions. What we do have is folks with the University of Colorado Boulder that put on what we call our North America cohort. So it's all the educators that are from states or provinces or even internationally that don't have that specific support. And so it's much more general, but they still have that third day focus. And so right now we have about 10 of these 15 partners that are for sure going to be joining us for 2025. What we are always looking for is who's that partner, who's that change maker in the community that we're missing. And I know some of what Extension does, definitely most familiar with kind of the youth development or 4-H focus, but I know that Extension is so much more connected in many of these states than we ever are. Yes, we have 8,000 educators, but they're definitely like we've got lots of folks in New York and Washington, California, and the Midwest, and then like 5 or 6 in Arizona and New Mexico. And so that's where we're always looking to kind of make sure that we're not duplicating efforts that you all may already be doing in your regions, but also really finding those partnerships. And I do these kind of general like sharing or general talks about how to build a cohort network every once in a while. And one big thing I say is that I give a ton of information and it kind of seems overwhelming. Like, why would I join a 6-month project with a organization I'm not super familiar with? And so maybe if that's how you're feeling right now, like Seth, that does not sound interesting at all, but maybe having you attend the Summer Institute for Climate Change Education as kind of a prospect. That's definitely something we like to support, of having folks attend for free and just kind of see, is this something that I could potentially partner with, or connect us with organizations in your region that are already doing that great work. So I'll give you another example of who we've partnered. This is just who we partnered with last year. Great partnership, long-term partnership with NOAA. We worked with the University of Wisconsin program. We've got folks with the Michigan Department of Environment, and then lots of other small nonprofits like Communitopia in Pennsylvania, 10 Strands, a large organization in California. And so again, that's kind of who we're really looking to connect with. Anybody that kind of dabbles in educational professional development, is interested in increasing their kind of climate change education support, all of that. And so yeah, I'm just making sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. And I don't know if I actually have answered your question, Art. Just want to clarify which UAF we're talking about. But yeah, that's a great question, Paula. When we first started off the Summer Institute, it was fairly K-12 formally focused. A big part in going virtual is that it allowed us to also invite a lot more speakers, because we weren't having to pay for hotels and travel and all that. And so now we're probably still about 60% formal, probably 50% K-12, and the rest we definitely have higher education, so university folks. We definitely have informal, so like nature centers, preschools, things like that. But And so really we're happy to work with anybody that works within that educational realm. And I want to make sure, yeah. I want to make sure I'm not missing. I'm seeing Wendy's question of kind of the breadth and depth of the summer work. And so um I'll kind of jump to some of those very specific details. As I mentioned, the Climate Summer Institute will take place this year, July 14th through 17th. And so July 14th and 15th will be those collective days that Climate Generation, we and the rest of my team really kind of do all the details. We do all the invites, make sure all the tech works, all that. And then that partner, that local partner, puts on the third day that can happen either July 16th or 17th. And so putting on anywhere from like a 6 to 8 hour workshop, basically. And we're really flexible on what that looks like, what folks really focus on, if it's in person, if it's virtual. And so that's kind of like the main July summer focus. The other part that I probably didn't talk too much about is that starting at the end of January, for 5 months, this network of partners meets once a month for about 90 minutes to really try to hash out again what do educators need, and so that helps us come up with those 5 themes that I shared. We kind of stick to a general theme year to year, but we try to change a little bit of the focus. We share things like marketing strategies. We share possible presenters. And so that's another kind of big part of that collaboration, is that somebody from your organization would join us in that work. And so altogether, I think we say it's about not 8 to 9 hours of pre-work, and then however long it takes you to plan a 6 to 8 hour workshop, which can, some folks take 30 hours. Some are like, oh, I do this all the time. It's not that stressful for me. And then actually putting on that 1 day regionally focused day of the Summer Institute. So hopefully, let me know if that didn't answer your question, Wendy. I'm going to look down, see Scott has a question. Does education programming explicitly engage multiple knowledge forms? Yes, and interested in relational approaches in education that are found in local immersion. So one maybe great thing, but can be slightly challenging about the Summer Institute is we have like a general focus we want, or general general focus if we want folks to like understand climate science. But then we're like, hey, there's this great speaker that does traditional ecological knowledge, or there's somebody that really did this great project in their classroom about phenology and how they were noticing bird migration or ice out dates, and actually connecting it to both the classroom and a way to get students emerged. And so it changes year to year of who those speakers are. And so I think, yes, that is something that we're always interested in. How many of the 35 to 40 workshops that we offer focus on that? I don't know at this time, but I would say like 3 to 4, you could probably put together like a track that really focuses on some of those human nature connections, things like that. And like we have some folks that are like, I'm going to do climate justice all the way through, or some that are like just climate data. And so that's again a great thing. It's like a big workshop that you go to, and every person chooses a different route. But probably that challenge is, how do I take 10 different educators' perspectives of what they've learned and put it in that local context? And so Climate Generation, for example, has often led the Midwest cohort. And so we might have teachers from 7 different states coming together on that third day. And that's always our challenge of, how do we take states that have very different education standards, very different, potentially like political support, or sometimes different like values or recreational uses, and put it in context. And what we often do is at least look at like, what are the impacts around climate change? Is it sea level rise? Well, no. Is it extreme weather? Sort of. It's in like extreme precipitation, it's droughts, it's changes to our winter temperatures. And that's one way that we kind of put it in that local context for what has been a fairly large region. And I'm gonna just scroll down, make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, that's a great question, a very important question, Paula. You're wondering about that financial piece of how much does it cost an educator to attend. So we do have a registration fee of $250 for this 3-day, what we say is 20 continuing education units worth of information. And so we do partner often with Hamline University, which is a Minnesota-based liberal arts college, to be able to provide those CEUs. And we try to work with those, our local partners, to make sure that we're meeting each state's requirements for offering continuing education units or credit hours. So yes, there is a registration fee. That being said, last year we had 350 educators and 190 of them were supported by scholarships. So Climate Generation is able to provide about 125 scholarships for educators to support and then, or to be able to attend. And then we've been able to partner with some other regional partners to provide additional scholarship support. So what we're trying to make sure is that any, especially formal educator that doesn't have professional development funds can really attend. And then we ask those folks that might work for larger organizations, larger nonprofits, sometimes universities, to be able to pay for themselves. But we have been able to fund at least 50% of folks who attend. Something that we tried last year that I think we'll try again this year is, especially in regions that we haven't had a lot of educators attend, Southwest, Southeast, Great Plains, we say straight up, hey, partner in North Dakota, the first 10 educators you can get to register are free. They don't really even have to fill out too much. And that's just been one way that we've tried to get to make sure that folks in regions that we haven't interacted with, but also maybe don't have a ton of support around climate change education, professional development, can attend the Institute. And I'm just, again, quickly rereading some of those messages. Yeah, okay, so Dennis, I'm just reading your message. We do both professional development workshops and have resources around eco-anxiety, climate anxiety. I wouldn't say it's like maybe our top 3 focuses, but we do often partner with the Clean Network, which is a climate literacy education organization, that's really around their leaning into quite a bit. And so it definitely shows up at the Summer Institute. We often have about 4 or 5 workshops that have something to do with whether it be how to talk about climate change and mental health, how to support students when they're going through climate anxiety. And so, yes, I think that's definitely something that is always, it's probably within our like top 5 themes. And even if it doesn't come out as like the main theme we're going to focus on, it's something we're always kind of thinking about. I'm going to go back to just making sure I've shared all of our thoughts. So you'll see those kind of expectations of our regional, we call them cohort leaders, but those regional partners, planning that one day, attending collaborative conversations, attending a debrief. So I mentioned there's a registration fee. One thing I have not mentioned is that we do try to support financially the work of those regional partners. So we know that not every federal or state partner can actually accept funds, but for those that can, we try to pay for at least some of the time of you being in collaboration with us. So we do have a $2,000 baseline payment, which is not a lot. but it does pay for some of the time of somebody in your organization to spend in planning and implementing. And then any educator who registers beyond the first 10, we pay you an additional $100. So for 20 folks, we'd pay $3,000. And again, I know that not every organization can accept those funds. So some regions are able to actually pass that back to the registrants and drop their registration fee down to like $150. Yeah, and so I think what I really wanted to kind of connect with folks is like if you're at all interested in possibly kind of jumping into further professional development around climate change, you already possibly work with educators. This is definitely a space that we'd love to possibly collaborate. Also, as I said, if you're like, no, this is not the year for it, or I don't really understand exactly what the heck you're talking about, Seth, that's where we want you to attend the Summer Institute next July and kind of see. Again, if you're like, nope, this is not the realm that I work with, but there's somebody else that I'm thinking of, that's again where I want to make sure we can connect. And so I will follow up with Dwayne to kind of pass on maybe these slides with you all, but also just put my email address in here. And so would love to connect. I've got just two more kind of slides. This isn't super relevant, but just know that that first session that we really start meeting with our partners happens at the end of January. And so right now we're still kind of in that gathering phase of seeing who's interested, who has availability, who has capacity, and then we start kind of coming into that collaboration of creating MOUs and making sure we kind of put that map together that I shared earlier. And yes, I forgot to add a very important added benefit that if you join, you do get, of course, a wonderful Teach Climate t-shirt as a cohort partner. But that is something I wanted to kind of mention. Yet this is one part of that Teach Climate network that Climate Generation runs. Another are these monthly workshops. And so just next week, we do actually have Christina Kwok, who will be sharing some kind of recommendations, some tips for educators of how to really talk and connect their students to green skills and really the green economy that we think we might be kind of transitioning into. And so that's something we also, of course, want to pass along and share with networks that you all are in. And so this is something that we do 9 months of the year, basically during the academic school year. We offer these monthly professional development programs. And so I'm gonna make sure I might reread your message here in a second, Scott, but Wendy is wondering, how do I see connecting with NECI in the climate education effort? Yes, and so I actually, I think I met with some of the other planning team folks about possibly how do we collaborate. I think one reason that I really wanted to connect is knowing, I think, as I said, that power that Extension has of being a trusted community member or a trusted member of like scientific, factual information, and also kind of that great connection with community members in rural areas, because that's something that I think we're based in the metro, and so we have a lot of great connections with teachers in large school districts, and we'd have partners in rural Minnesota, but we've kind of found that not all educators don't always feel supported, maybe by the programming that we do. And so want to make sure that's definitely something. So I did a little bit of work last year of how to talk to rural educators about climate change and what we're currently missing on. So I think like kind of what I would possibly be interested in support is just sharing things like this monthly workshop, sharing that summer institute, but also again, if there's either somebody yourselves or somebody else within Extension that are like, hey, I really want to jump into professional development. Maybe this is something I kind of forgot to mention, is that Some of those regions have multiple partners. So you kind of see some of these clusters. That's because multiple organizations are coming together to actually lead that cohort day. So you might be like, man, I do not know how to lead a 8-hour workshop specifically for teachers. That's where you might know a partner within education. To actually partner with. You're like, I know all about how to localize climate data or climate action or share some of the amazing things that extension programs are doing. That's where, hey, if you already know them, that's great. If you don't already know them, that's where you're like, Seth, I'm interested, but I definitely would need a partner, and that's where I can possibly connect. So I think with that, I'm gonna probably stop sharing my screen. You've all been great about asking questions in the chat, but I'm sure I missed one or two. And so would love to hear if there are any questions or about the Summer Institute or just about kind of how we got to that like cohort model, because that's something that took us a while. And I think from what I've heard of like some of the work that NECI is doing is something that maybe you're already doing or are kind of moving into, is how to support each other. But being from very different states with different maybe university support of like, what are those challenges, but also opportunities. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And if folks have questions, would love to hear them. And overall, I want to thank you for taking the time to connect today.
Thanks, Seth. And since this is a small group, we can, if someone does have further questions, you can just open your mic. And if we have multiple questions, if you just want to raise your hand, we'll try to take them in turns. Oh,
Go ahead,
Wendy,
Wendy.
go ahead.
Okay. Seth, thank you so much. It just seems like there's so many parallels with NECI and what you're doing. And actually, I was familiar with your website. I ran across it a few months ago and have tried to be exploring it. But one of the problems that NECI members tell us about their their continuing battle or journey, as the case may be, is how to get diversity in their program clientele. And you already have a set of diversity factors in teachers and in the classroom, but is there something that you can contribute or share with us that could help lead that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a goal that everybody within education that does, whether it's their organization, their institution, or personally, has a goal of trying to make whatever field we're talking about more equitable and inclusive, is how to make sure that we're not just staying within the silo of who we already have in our networks. I know that what I looked through is that most of NECI is white folks, but one thing that I've definitely had to I think change a little bit is probably my own meaning of diversity. Yes, racial diversity is incredibly important, but especially around climate change, just some of those like economic diversity issues are very, very relevant. What we have found, and we're still struggling with this, we have 20 partners that made up those 15 organizations. It has been a goal for the last 5 years to become more racially diverse, and 17 of those 20 are white. And part of that is our own network just keeps pinging around. We're just talking to a lot of the same people. Also, somebody that is maybe, whatever their background is, somebody that's new to a network like this, it's overwhelming to step into a space and be like, I'm going to share what I think educators of my community need with a bunch of folks that either have been doing this for 15 years, all come from the same general background. And so we've really had to change a lot of the practices we do so that we're not trying to put people on the spot to have to represent their entire community. just kind of show up and share their professional experience. And if we want them to share like personal experience with something, we have to set that up. And so a big thing is how much time it does take us to ask new racially diverse partners to join us in this work. And we've had a couple that have been great, and we've had a couple that exploded in our face. Like they did not go well. We didn't set ourselves up for success. We didn't set our partners up for success. And so like as far as partnership, I think the biggest lessons are just that it does take a lot of time to build that trust, that you're kind of trying to meet the same things. And also be very open to like, hey, please, I don't want to say call us out when something we're doing isn't working. But I think that is a big thing, is because trying to make sure that there's nothing like no hidden resentment about the way that you're talking about reaching communities, or just being sometimes like I'm straight up oblivious of what some of the challenges to educators in the Southwest or Southeast are. And so I don't know that what I'm saying is being like very Midwest focused unless somebody calls me in or calls me out on that. And so that's probably been one thing. Another thing we have changed as far as like educator recruitment, it has been changing how we do, like we used to have diversity scholarships or something, like just the what we called it and how our recruitment was, we had to completely change. And so offering scholarships but in a way that doesn't feel exclusionary. I also have about 75 listening calls with scholarship applicants to really understand what folks are trying to get out of participating in something like this. And so while it's like a 10-minute phone call, that doesn't build trust or relationship. At least when they show up and they're like, oh great, it's another, I don't know, middle-aged white guy from Minnesota, they at least have connected with me about something. And so I'm not going to say that 100% of what we do is the best way to do it, to build diversity and inclusion. But a lot of the things that I see other organizations try, we've tried, and some have been successful, and some just like, man, that did not go the way we wanted. And so that's been the kind of the biggest thing of like, you're gonna try and fail sometimes, and but to keep knowing that that is a goal. But also I as I mentioned, I've changed a little bit about like what am I talking about when I talk about inclusivity and equity, and really making sure that we're talking about all communities. And a big one that I don't think we've missed in the conversation, but again, those rural schools and rural communities where renewable energy is not incredibly feasible, and things like that. And so I don't know if that actually answered your question, but I do want to have Paula share, as I see your hand in the air, Paula.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes, I have a question. So I am based at a university that's actually in New York State. So I would think that that would be, where I'd apply, right? But I have an extensive amount of experience in the southeastern region, specifically New Orleans and Atlanta. So yeah, mine is more urban. I don't really know the rural areas as well. So I would think that, if my university are going to get involved in this, it would still be New York, which is probably like inundated. But I guess, I mean, I'm trying to, it would just be easier for me and my university to do it through New York. But I just want to give a heads up that, even though you might have some people who are in more urban northeastern areas, it couldn't hurt to reach out and say, hey, is there someone who maybe attended college in the Southeast, has worked in the Southeast or the Southwest, tribal nations? It can't hurt.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate that, Paula, because that is a great suggestion. And yes, we do have strong support in New York, but New York is big. And every time, like we used to have like 4 years ago, we had a partner with the New York City Department of Education Sustainability. And it was a great partnership. And they're like, okay, we're going to put this on. We're going to have 50 people, which for our experience is quite large. But that's less than like probably 0.1% of the number of teachers in New York City. And so even if we had 2 or 3 partners in New York City, we'd still be successful in trying to reach folks. And so I share that map mostly to be like, okay, here's where we have support, but it's not to say we couldn't have continued support within a state. Our partner is actually in like upstate New York, the Wild Center, and RPI, I think, is out of Buffalo. And so we're definitely always looking for more support in certain regions. And then, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and I'll try to follow up with you about kind of some of that work in the Southeast and Southwest, because yeah, we had a partner called a nonprofit called EcoRise that has strong work in Louisiana and New Orleans. But they just weren't like, we don't have enough capacity to do it on our own this year. We've got a great partner in Florida, but again, these regions that are really large and have the number of educators, we're always looking looking for new areas and new partnerships.
Yeah, and I just put New Orleans is very complicated. So yeah, it's you really need to go from the inside out. It's just they're gonna see you as a carpetbagger trying to steal something, to be honest. So because I have a couple friends who run some EJ nonprofits there, so they consider me an outsider, even though I lived there for an entire chunk of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I've had to like personally come to terms with, is that like I can want to be like a collaborator and a network maker, but really we realized that we had to partner with these much more localized organizations to try to build any sort of trust with, whether it be school districts or principals or all the way down to teachers, for a lot of different reasons. A lot of teachers get pulled in so many different directions. Sometimes this isn't a trusted message to talk about climate change, and maybe again finding that local partner that's like, actually we need to talk about environmental sustainability, or again that agriculture focus. And so that's why we're really always looking for those partners that kind of know what works and what doesn't work. Awesome.
All right. I don't see any other questions. So once again, Seth, I want to thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. A lot of great information. You are getting a thumbs up there, so that's another good sign. Just as a reminder to folks, we will not have a January session because it will be on the 1st, and I don't think people will attend. So we will send out information on the February webinar here in the next few weeks, probably right after the holidays. So with that, again, appreciate those of you who attended being on. Thank you, Seth, and hope everybody has a safe and pleasant rest of the year and holiday season. Thank you.
Thanks all.